Hey y'all, happy Friday. I am a pretty happy guy because I am broadcasting to you from my brand new iPhone X. Yes, I'm one of those guys. I totally drink the Apple Kool-Aid and I love it. Becca says I have a problem, but I don't think it's a problem at all. It's a pretty cool phone. Excited to play with it and show it to y'all. But let's talk about the lesson. There's some cool stuff. I love the opening line right there on the first page. It says, "The good news from the Bible is that life change is possible and it's not dependent on you." That's fantastic news, and something we can really drive home with the students. Um, I want you to point out the verse to our kids. Galatians 6:7. It says, "Whatever you sow, you will reap." And I'm telling you that verse now, and I'm going to end with another verse later on for a very specific reason. But that's a very important truth because right off the bat, we see Jacob reaping what he sowed. Remember, he was a trickster. He was all about tricking guys. And lo and behold, some of y'all, I heard you point this out last week, but tell the kids again this week. As soon as he starts his new life in a new place, he's the one who's getting tricked. And it's pretty interesting. And again, he was reaping what he had sowed. But even in that, God showed him a lot of grace and taught him some stuff. But I just think that's kind of interesting. The lesson totally skips most of chapter 32, but I don't want us to do that. Show the students a good chunk of chapter 32, specifically start with verse 9 and carry them all the way through verse 23. You don't necessarily have to read it all, although I would read to them the prayer from chapter 32, verses 9 through 12, because that's such a good prayer. It's an honest prayer, and it's Jacob just saying, God, I need your help. Please help me. I'm trusting in you. The problem is he prayed that prayer and then immediately didn't trust God. We read in verses 13 through 23, he's trying to fix this situation all by himself. He's still scheming. He's still making a plan. He even goes so far, just kind of out of fear, he puts all of his family in front of him, like, all of you people protect me, right? And so he gets left behind. He's all by himself. It's in the middle of the night. And that's where we pick up in verse 24, where we see Jacob wrestling with God, which is such a it's just weird. It's really, really weird. But explain that setup to the students so they understand the scenario. Jacob asked God for his help. And God did help Jacob, but he didn't help Jacob in the way that he thought he was going to. And part of it was this was how God was going to teach Jacob, you really do need to trust me. And that became a literal wrestling match. But what the students need to understand is we really do wrestle with God frequently. We wrestle with not wanting to obey him. We wrestle with any number of things about trusting him or obeying our parents or just being kind of other people, forgiving other people. For heaven's sakes, do we wrestle with that one? We wrestle with God all the time. And what you need to point out to the kids, help them, the boys in particular, because some of them are going to be like, hey, boy, Jacob was a stud. He wrestled God and he almost beat God. No, he really didn't. Help the students see that God was being very gracious with Jacob in this wrestling match, because God could have crushed him. No question, not even needing a 10 count to say that it was a KO. God could have crushed him, but he didn't. He was being gentle with him, and he was persistent, lovingly persistent with Jacob. And then eventually, yeah, he tapped his hip, literally knocked his hip out of socket, and taught Jacob a physical lesson, but also a gracious lesson that literally physically changed him, but eventually would lead to a massive heart change as well. So there's that. I think it's pretty cool that Jacob had two experiences with God. Most of us don't get one experience with God like this, much less two of them. But I would point that out to the students. Forgive me. No, he had three experiences with God, but the two really before Jacob was ever following God whatsoever. That's another example of God's incredible graciousness with people. It's not pin up on us. It's not pin up on our goodness. Holy people don't get more of God than unholy people do, because it has nothing to do with us. It has everything to do with God's graciousness. God reveals himself who he wants to, and God gives himself who he wants to. But what I want you to end with is Romans 12:11. It says, we've overcome by the blood of the Lamb and by the word of our testimony. Jacob overcame this wrestling match with God because of God's graciousness, just like we overcome our wrestling matches with God by God's graciousness. The blood of Jesus on our lives changes us so that we're different, so that we don't have to reap what we sow. And we've sown a lot of really bad oats, right? But God's kind and He's gracious and He helps us overcome. Grace changes people, and it's God's kindness that leads us to repentance. Romans teaches us that too. So I've gone over my 5 minutes. Guys, I love y'all. Have an awesome weekend. Can't wait to hang out with you on Sunday. Go get an iPhone X. Bye.